I think that idea of enough is a real important point. I think everyone needs to kind of decide what is enough,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when you realize you're really blessed.
Yeah.
Is that anything above and beyond enough?
Yeah.
I have enough.
So I personally love this principle here. This is Proverbs 12:9.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, better to be a nobody and yet have a servant than pretend to be a somebody and have no food. And I see this so often, and I see this on social media. I see people, we call them it's like there's certain areas in the world, we call it the home of the $50,000 millionaire. And, we see people just trying to be somebody by maybe showing off in flashy cars or whatever it may be. But how can we balance the desire for financial success with the wisdom of living within our means and um, avoiding appearances?
That is a really good question. I think that financial well-being comes from that, just living within our means.
Yeah.
And there was a book I read many, many years ago. I believe the title was The Millionaire Next Door.
Okay.
And the whole idea there was the millionaire next door, you don't know they're a millionaire
Yeah.
because they very frugal, they're not flashy, they're not showy, but they are actually putting more away and investing more than they are living on.
Yeah.
And in the end, they're the one that really wins.
Yeah.
And so again, that idea of living within our means, not trying to keep up with the Joneses, or whoever it is, or the Smiths, or whoever it is.
No fun.
No pun intended there at all. Yeah, but I think that it's really important. It's amazing how many couples don't have an idea of even what their monthly income is,
Mm.
what their annual income is, what their expenses are. I mean, something as simple as a budget. I don't know how you live within your means if you don't have a budget.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Just super practical stuff, and these are the folks that come talk to the pastor because they're having conflict, and you start asking some questions, you'd be stunned. I'd love to do research on it, like how many married couples actually have a budget that not only is just in theory, but in practice,
Wow.
that this is the income, these are the expenses are below the income,
Yeah.
living within our means.
Sure.
And there's something about even the church that I lead that you are a part of and your husband, there's something about just knowing that your expenses are not going to be as much as your income. It just brings so much peace
So
into our life. And one thing we do, like even in the church, whatever the income was the previous year, we set the budget for the next year at 90% of what the income was.
smart.
And there's always enough. There's always enough in financial difficulties, things like that. There's always enough. Not to max out, okay, here's our income. Let's make sure our expenses are exactly the same. But keeping those expenses low and watching that in the detail of a budget is incredibly important.
That's
It
huge.
really is.
No, that's amazing.
I think that's what that verse, Proverbs 12:9, is really talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that sums it up really, really nicely. And I think too, this reminds me so much of I talk about a lot of now. Morgan Housel wrote a really, really good book, The Psychology of Money.
Hmm.
And it is so interesting because he talks about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. And wealthy is very difficult to emulate. And so when I talk about credit, I say credit is the cornerstone to building wealth because wealth is the money that you don't see. It's the money that you don't spend. So it's very hard to emulate the millionaire next door
Yeah.
because you don't actually see the money that he puts away versus social media is like, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, be a consumer, be this, be flashy. And so people are emulating rich people because that's what you see, but they're unable to emulate the wealthy because they don't see it. And so That just made me think of that. So,
Mm.
really, really amazing information.
I love kind of the tone of even that verse in Proverbs 12:9. Better to be a nobody
Yeah.
and yet have a servant than pretend to be a somebody and have no food.
Ye
You know, the whole idea, and isn't that so natural that we wanna be a somebody? I wanna be a somebody, and yet being a somebody is not the things we have. Being a somebody, I believe, is the impact that we have on other people,
Yes.
in a positive way.
Yeah.
I would say as a pastor in a Christ-like way.
Yeah.
That's how you're really a somebody.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not the stuff.
It's not the stuff. It's
Mhm.
never the stuff. There's no fulfillment in stuff
No,
at all.
no, and that's
No.
why you do see, professional athletes, as you mentioned in my bio there, I'm a high school football coach as well. You see professional athletes and movie stars and
Yeah.
all that, that are just miserable,
Yeah.
have so much stuff, but not fulfilled,
Yeah.
and so it's not the stuff that brings the happiness and the fulfillment.
Amen to that. I love that. Thank you. I love this. I love this. I love this. So I'm gonna go to the Proverbs 22:7.
Mhm.
I'm gonna jump to Proverbs 22:7, and it says, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." My husband and I actually talk about this a lot. What practical steps can listeners take to avoid unhealthy debt and experience financial freedom?
Mhm. Couple thoughts like that just from my own life. One, when my wife Susie and we owned our first home, and the furnace went out, like, the first winter, and we were making those financial decisions together when we bought the house, but it was like everything we could afford,
Yeah.
and it was like a foreclosure and this sort of thing. And the furnace went out, and we didn't have a whole lot in
Yeah.
savings. We needed a new furnace, and it's the middle of winter, and it's like 20 degrees outside, and, you know, we I'd say we had a couple $100 in the bank or something like that, and so, Susie said, "I'm gonna call my daddy, and my dad will give us the money," and I said, "No, no, don't do that," and she said, "Why?" And I said, because if we take money from your father, and he's a real good, godly man,
Mhm.
but he's got the right to now say and speak into what other financial decisions we're making, everything like that.
Wow.
And I said, We need to find a loan. We need to get a loan so that we can pay this off. But I don't want to open the door to that potential marriage problem
Yeah.
by taking personal money from your father or from anybody else
Sure.
personally for that
Yeah.
for that matter.
Yeah.
And I is that verse, the borrower subject to the lender.
Yeah.
And that's even very much so at a personal level. And, when I asked Susie's dad if I could propose to her, before we got engaged, and he said, are you gonna support her in the manner in which she's accustomed? And I said, I give you my word. And for me, it would have been violating that if not, "Hey, pop, I need you to help me out financially because I can't put heat, in the house there." So we ended up got a short-term loan. We're able to pay that off and all. But I think there's something to that. The borrower is subject to the lender. The lender can make some demands that
Mhm.
our hands are tied.
Yeah.
When we've gone to them for financial help like that. So in that case, that was kind of an emergency situation.
Sure.
Here in New York, you got to have heat. It's not optional unless it's summer.
Yep.
But so we had to get some sort of ends. We needed to get it within like a week, or so. Our babies, our girls were young and everything like that. But, I think especially when it comes to, like, personal loans from an individual or something like that,
Yeah.
uh, and it's the same thing for me now as a father, as a grandfather. There are things that I could do, financially that would really make it easier for my kids, for my grandchildren, but at the same time, there's a stress and a pressure if I'm like, "Let me take care of that. Let me do that for you financially." So I see that not so much, that verse, Not so much with lending institutions.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it does apply, but I think it's more so with personal loans and
Mm,
things like that.
okay. I love that perspective.
Yeah.
I love that. You even have alluded, I mean, you're very open, even with your church family, about where you put your money just for the church. And there was a project that you were actually working on. You were, I think, moving the church to Poughkeepsie, if not
Yep,
mistaken.
that's right.
And you ended up backing out of the deal because you said this is not a good deal.
Right.
And you were really you didn't feel comfortable moving forward. Do you wanna reiterate or capitalize on that? And
Sure. What happened was we'd purchased, some property, a building
Mhm,
in Poughkeepsie,
mhm.
and, went through all the process of getting the approvals to renovate it, and then, that was when COVID happened,
Yeah,
and everything shut down, and we couldn't do anything at all during that. When things opened up again, the price, without any change, we already had the plans approved and everything, the price to do the renovation went from 1.7 million to 3.7 million with no change whatsoever. And we looked at that, and as the trustees of the church and all, the group that are trustees, and, we just couldn't make it happen,
yeah,
and it would have actually, I think, forfeited our future
sure,
had we tried to push through with that.
sure.
And so, kind of interesting, I was reluctant to sell the property, because I really felt like God had spoken to me that we were supposed to do that,
Yeah,
and it was in that trustees meeting that one of the trustees actually said to me, and it really helped me. He said, "Greg, I think that you did hear from God,
yeah,
but it wasn't to develop that property. I think it was to flip the property,
yeah,
and you never would buy a piece of property and flip it
yeah,
for the church." I
yeah,
mean, I wouldn't. That's just not the type of person I am.
yeah,
Uh, and when he said that, I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "And I think God's providing for the church this way."
yeah.
And so, we ended up selling that property, and we owned it for 4 years, and we sold it for double what we paid for 4 years earlier.
Wow.
And that really set us in an incredibly healthy place like that. Yeah.
Was that almost a little bit frustrating to the point where maybe you had to suppress your ego a little bit because you're like, "This was my vision. This is where we were supposed to go. This is where we're supposed to be."
It was really hard.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really tough. Yeah.
yeah.
Hindsight now, I mean, and we took those proceeds, a lot of those we invested in our current campus
Mhm.
and, expanded that and everything. So it worked out real well, but I was the one that was dragging my feet,
Sure.
and, they weren't gonna the board of trustees wasn't gonna override, me. They were waiting for me to come along, um, because again, I was the one that was gonna have to stand there in front of the church and say, "This is what the plan was.
Yeah,
However,
yeah.
we're supposed to make our plans, but, there's a great verse in the Bible that says, God makes a plan, but God or man makes a plan, but God ordains their steps." And so I think it's important to plan and all, but God was directing our steps a little bit differently than what we thought. And, so I had to stand up and say, "We're doing something different. It's not
So
gonna work." And, there were very few people in the church at the time were like, "No, I wanna, put the church in financial jeopardy."
yeah.
I mean, nobody, wanted to
Sure.
do that,
Yeah.
at all. So it was a learning experience for everyone,
I
I
can only
think.
imagine. I
Mhm.
can only but I love the fact that you were able to pivot, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I see people struggle with is they're so fixated on a goal and an outcome, and oftentimes they're unwilling to pivot to their own demise and not suppressing the ego and just being malleable for, the destination that they're trying to get to. So I think that that's a very valuable lesson for people to hear. You have to be able to pivot when necessary.
There's a great, acronym for ego,
Okay, tell me.
easing God out.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
easing God.
good.
That's a coach at play.
That's
Yeah.
good.
So ego, what is ego? Is when we ease God out of the decision, out of the
Mhm.
perspective. Yeah, ego, yeah, we don't wanna live, feed the ego. That's not gonna be good for us in the long run.
No. Ooh, I like that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna use that. I'm gonna teach the
Go
entire
ahead.
team that. That's
Yeah, I heard it's from someone else. He's not original to
that's
me.
okay. It's still really good. So, I actually do wanna ask you about just some of the misconceptions people have about money. So it can be Christians, it can be people in general,
Mhm.
but how do you address them using scripture? And again, I see so many different perspectives. I see people who are successful, and I see that they have a lot of guilt around being successful. I see people who are just like, God hates me, and that's why I have no money. I'm being punished. I see people who just don't understand what money is for. And can you speak to those different scenarios?
Mhm. Sure. Again, money is not evil, is neutral. Money is an indicator how we view it, what we do with it, of what's in our heart. So it's more of a symptom, if you want to look at it that way.
Mm.
But it can be a positive indicator
Mhm.
as well. Um, so one of the things that I think is so important is just being generous.
Mhm.
Generosity, there's nothing that um, cures greed and avarice like generosity. It just breaks the back of it. And so we talk a lot about being generous. I teach that. But, Jesus said it's more blessed to give than to receive. And a lot of times you'll hear that. And I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. Oftentimes in churches, you'll hear that quoted, it's more blessed to give than to receive.
Mhm.
But the context is always, so you need to give to the church.
Mm.
But that's not a one-way street, that's a two-way street.
Mm.
And so I think as a church, it's very important for us to be generous.
Mhm.
It's very important for us to be generous. And I've found through the years when things are financially tight, and it does happen sometimes, that instead of pulling back in our generosity, that's the time to be even more generous. It doesn't make any sense, but biblically, God just blesses that when we're open-handed
Mm.
instead of closed-fisted. We've had opportunities through the years, again, 35 years I've been pastoring at the same church. There were times when things were really, really tight. There were times when, uh, I actually had to make some tough decisions, like, "Don't pay my salary this month, but we will continue to give to these outside organizations and be generous to them that we've committed to." And every time, there's been probably 3 occasions when it was really intense like that, where I had to decline pay. God immediately provided. And I think if it was instead, "No, you pay me, and we're gonna cut off support from these other missions organizations," things like that, I don't think we'd be where we are today. And so, again, money's neutral. I think that, there are sound biblical principles that when they're followed, God's blessing comes as a result of that.
Wow.
I think if we ignore them, I think that we can get into some financial situations really, really fast. I don't think it's God's like cursing somebody or, judging them, and that's why they're broke or anything like that. Chances are there's a string of decisions back there somewhere that
Sure.
that weren't really wise or in line, with biblical principles there. But you can't change the past, but you can start new today. And so
Mhm.
begin to make some real positive financial decisions that would reflect those biblical principles and just watch God do. It's one of my favorite sayings, Micah. You might have heard it before. Um, I say it at the church and even at a personal level. I'm going to do all that I can do, and then I'm going to trust God to do what only He can do.
Oh, I love
And
that.
and and so I think that's even at a church level. Like I said, we're going to do all that we can do, and then trust God to do what only He can do. When it comes to personal finances for the Williamsons, we're gonna do all we can do, and then we're gonna trust God to do what only He can do, and when He adds His blessing to it, there's nothing like that. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think I answered that question.
You absolutely did. You absolutely did. Yes. That was absolutely incredible. I just wow. That's all I can say. Wow. So, for someone listening today who just feels so overwhelmed by their financial stress, and I see this a lot. And obviously, in my business, I mean, we're getting a lot of people because I look at credit reports all day.
Yeah.
So, we see it on paper. What would be a biblical principle or first step that you would recommend that they take to begin rebuilding?
Mhm. This is gonna sound strange, but I kinda touched on it a little bit. I'd say put God first in your finances.
And how do you do that?
Biblically, I think that the biblical word for that is tithing,
Mhm.
actually. That word tithe doesn't mean give money.
Mhm.
It actually means an amount. It means 10%.
Okay.
And it doesn't only mean the percentage. It means 10% is the first 10%. And God says in Malachi in the Old Testament, he says to test him in that. It's the only place anywhere in the Bible that God says put him to the test.
Mm.
He says, it's okay to test me in this. And he said, and see if I won't throw open the windows of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you can't contain it. And he doesn't say that about any other topic or subject. And so I would encourage people to do that. I've seen some dramatic stories of folks that have done that. Put God first. Jesus put it this way in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount, which is not the Sermon on the Mount, but it's the Sermon on the Mount. He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, his ways, that means, and all these things will be added to you. And if you read there in Matthew 5, he's literally talking about food, clothing, and shelter. He says, put God first and he'll take care of you. And I know that, let me put it this way also, 2 points on that. Number one, that our government even recognizes charitable contributions when it comes to the taxes we pay,
Mm.
that they actually value that.
Yeah.
And it's reflected in your taxable income every year. And so there's a benefit even to begin to lower how much that you're, paying in taxes in that way. And so that would be the first thing that I would encourage people to do. And we actually at the church, you're probably aware of this, we have a 90-day money back guarantee because,
Love that.
are like, we're not doing it. It's God. You do this for 90 days.
Mm.
And if you don't feel like God's blessed you,
Yeah.
we'll return 100% of your money.
Yeah.
And we track that for the people that do that. And I can't, probably 8 times we've done that over the years. We've never had anyone come back and say, I don't feel like God's blessed me. Like we have had people come back and like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Sure.
Why didn't I do it sooner?
Yeah.
So generosity is just so incredibly important. It's like the principle biblically of sowing and reaping. If you plant an apple seed, you don't get even an apple. What do you get? An apple tree
Mm.
full of apples.
Yeah.
There's something about when we release it
Mm-hmm.
that it's blessed and it multiplies back to us.
Wow.
When we hold on and we hold on tight and we have a firm grip and now our hand starts getting, we start getting a cramp in our hand because we're holding on to it so tight, the seed just dies.
Mm.
Because that's not what seeds are for. Seeds are meant to be planted. Seeds are meant to be released. So I think that the whole idea of generosity, and one of the great things, like on a podcast like this, we're not talking to, maybe there's some folks from our church, but I have no motivation. I'm not saying give money to our church, or anything like that. But I've just seen that principle time and time and time again, that God said, test him in it and see if he doesn't open up the windows of heaven.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many stories that come to mind, but I think I would end up just taking this entire time. So I'm gonna like kind of let you leave with the mic drop, because that was so heartwarming for me just to hear that. And I love that principle so much. And I have seen in my life personally just how that has just enriched my life in more ways than I can even count. And I'm just amazed at just how you read the word and you just do what it says. And it's kind of interesting how God just doesn't lie.
Right.
He's exactly
Can
what
I
he
tell you?
says.
Can I tell you a
Yeah,
story?
please.
Personal story, and I have not ever shared this with the church because it's really about them. But since we're on this podcast, and like I said, maybe there are some folks from the church, but
Sure.
what? So in 2000, we were trying to do some expansion, some renovation in our current facility. So it was the 25-year anniversary of the church back in the year 2000. And so we had a stewardship campaign, and we just asked people to give above and beyond what they normally would, and make a 3-year commitment to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like a leader is supposed to be out in front.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm leading the church in this. And so Susie and I talked about it. We prayed about it. And she said, well, I'm just going to trust you. What you feel like God puts on your heart, honey, you just tell me and we'll talk that through. Okay. So I was praying about it. Back then, I think I think I made about $45,000 a year. That was or that was our household income, was $45,000 a year. And as I was praying, I felt like God say to me in prayer, "Give $30,000
Wow.
over 3 years."
Wow.
So 10,000 additional a year
Wow.
for 3 years. I didn't know how in the world we were gonna do it.
Wow.
But I literally Susan and I talked about it, she's like, "If that's what God's saying, he's gonna provide. Don't know how. We have no idea how that's gonna happen." We filled out the pledge card. We had pledge cards, $30,000 a year.
Oh my goodness.
And so, we turned that in, and then we just kind of like, "Okay, Lord, it's up to you now." And we started to give and do all we could above and beyond what we regularly would. And one day in the mail, we got a flyer, and it was from a realtor. And they said, "We just sold a house 4 doors down from you for this amount of money, and if you're interested in selling your house, give me a call." And, we weren't thinking about selling or anything like that at all. And, we're like, "I wonder how much this would even be worth." So we called this woman, and she came over, and she goes, "Oh, this house will sell in a heartbeat." And it was, again, it was a foreclosure, the same one the furnace had gone out in. It was a foreclosure. I'm not a Mr. Fixer-upper, so the way we bought it was the way we sold it. And, we ended up selling that house. We weren't even planning on moving. We sold that house for $60,000. We made $60,000.
Ah,
We turned around and paid 30 of that commitment to the church,
wow.
put $30,000 down on what was our dream home in 2000, and that's still the home we live in today, and it is above and beyond our wildest dreams.
Wow.
And God did that.
Wow.
And it was just such a pivotal moment in our life in terms of, "God, you really are serious about this,
Yeah.
that if we trust you and if we follow biblical principles." I've never seen anyone declare bankruptcy because they were so generous.
I love that.
I've never heard that ever it's because I gave so much away, that's why I had to declare bankruptcy. I've never heard that. It may have happened, I've never heard it. And I talked to a lot of folks.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
I have nothing left. That was amazing. That was amazing.
Yeah, and when you asked me about this and all, Susie said, "You gonna tell that story?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I will. Yeah, can't share that, it's a little awkward in church and all, in our church where we pastor, but never regretted that because God came through, and every time just waking up in the morning, I go downstairs, I'm making my coffee, I'm like, "Lord, you did this. You did this beyond our wildest dreams."
That's amazing. It's just amazing. We had spoken a little bit about prayer before purchases, and I had an interaction, I had an encounter with someone just this Wednesday when I was traveling back from Florida. I was speaking to an individual, and we ended up going really deep,
Mm,
and he is struggling because his second mom is she has terminal cancer,
mm,
and he's really struggling with this, and we ended up talking about faith and religion. Very long story short, I asked him, I said, "Have you prayed about it?" And he got really, really serious and very solemn, and he's like, "I'm not gonna be a hypocrite." I'm like, "What do you mean?"
mm,
And he said, "Well," he's like, "I can't come to him now." He's like, I've had my back turned to him for so many years." He's like, "I'm gonna come to him when I need something?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yes."
right,
I said, "You are." I said, when else are you supposed to come to him?"
right.
And I just wanted to hear from you because honestly, Greg, it broke my heart into a million pieces, and I could start crying right now, but I won't. How when you're telling someone who maybe doesn't have a relationship with God, who maybe doesn't know how to pray, or maybe is feeling like, "I don't deserve to pray to him because
Right.
I've been this way or this person for so long," what would you say to that person?
Mhm.
And maybe they're listening.
Yeah, that's a great question, Micah, and I can certainly hear the emotion in that. So much for me in my relationship with God changed when I became a father. And, you know, we have kids. My wife and I have three girls, and raising them, there are times they did things that I did not like, things that did not please me, but I'm always their father.
Mm.
There are times when the teenage girls didn't take my advice, but I'm still their father. And whenever they'd come to me, because my heart is really for them, Dad, I messed up. Dad, I need your help. I never rejected them for that. It wasn't like, well, it's too late now, or something like that. Of all the things that God could be identified as in the scripture, is Jesus that first referred to him as our Father. And over, our Father, our Father, our Father. And so that's what I would say to that gentleman is that, you know what? Just like kids turn their back, go their own way and all, he's still a father.
Mm.
And because you turned your back on him, he never turned his back on you, and he won't. And a need is a great reason to go to God
Mhm.
because you have a need.
Yeah.
I think the fact is, Micah, that all of us are much more needy than we realize. We're in need of him. And so that's what I would say to that gentleman or anyone that feels that way. I'm not worthy. It's not about being worthy. It's because you're his kid. It's because he's your father. You know, I did for my girls as an imperfect father. And Jesus even draws that contrast. He said, your earthly fathers, if you asked for a loaf of bread, they didn't give you a stone. If you asked for a fish, they didn't give you a scorpion. And they're evil and compared to a perfect heavenly father. And so because he's so perfect like that, we can go to him, whether it's been a lifetime, whether it's been 20 years we've been running or not, we can go to him and it's not like we have to call out to him and he's distant, far away. He's right there.
Mm.
He's right there. It's like that parable that Jesus told of the prodigal that left and abandoned his father, wasted all the money, all of his inheritance, and then said, I'm going to return back to my father. I'm just going to ask him if I could be a servant because the servants have it better than I do.
Mm.
And it says when he went and returned home, the father saw him a far way off and ran to him.
Mm.
And that's what I would say to this gentleman. Listen, God's going to run to you. He's not going to wait for you to even get up to the front porch. And the beautiful detail in that story that Jesus told, it seemed like the father was just standing on the porch looking, like every morning, just looking out on the horizon. And he knew his son so well that he could just tell by the silhouette, just by the gait of his walk, that's my boy. That's my boy. And he took off and he ran to him. And he wrapped his arms around him and he said, my son that was dead is now alive. So that's the heart of God. So I'd encourage that man to just pray. Pray. He'll hear you.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Greg, I mean, I can't thank you enough
Oh.
for being here on a Friday. And so before we wrap up, can you please let our listeners and our viewers know how to find you?
How to find me? Well, Valley Church in Hopewell Junction, New York. Our website is valleyny.cc. And you can follow us online. We have an online campus. If they don't live locally, we have about 1,200 people every week on our online campus. And of course, in person, we're about 70 miles north of New York City in the Hudson Valley there.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best way to find me.
All right. And I tag him and his church every Sunday.
Yes, you do, faithfully. And we appreciate you doing that. Never even asked you to, but just out of the goodness of your own heart. Thank you, Mike, for doing that.
The whole world to know. I can't say enough good things, and I know this is going to enrich a lot of lives. And
so.
I thank you so much for being here.
You're
So,
welcome.
with that being said, that is a wrap.